This is the Life by Design with Angela Weiss podcast, episode 41, Sleep Isn't Optional, What Poor Sleep is Doing to Your Mental Health. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Angela Weiss, dual board-certified nurse practitioner, author, and someone who deeply believes that mental health and physical health are not separate conversations because your brain lives in your body, and today we're talking about something that almost every person listening has struggled with at some point in their life, something we often negotiate with, minimize, push through, or treat like an inconvenience until our body absolutely forces us to pay attention. Sleep, or maybe more accurately, the lack of it. Today's episode, sleep. I mean, come on, who's getting enough sleep these days? Most people aren't. If you're listening to this while exhausted, while surviving on caffeine determination, cortisol, and I'll catch up later while your body is tired but your brain refuses to power down, then this episode is for you. If anxiety steals your nights, if you lie awake replaying conversations, worrying about tomorrow, your health, your family, your finances, or whether you forgot something important like to turn off the stove or, lock the doors. If your sleep has fallen apart during stress, burnout, grief, trauma, or overwhelm, this is for you too, because sleep is not laziness. Sleep is not optional. Sleep is healthcare, mental health care, physical health care, and your mental health is deeply connected to it. One of the reasons I want to talk about this topic is because I've sat with probably thousands of people over the years who ask some version of, what's happening to me? Why can't I sleep? Why does my brain feel like this? Am I losing my mind? If that question sounds familiar, I actually wrote an entire book called Am I Going Crazy? Because severe stress, nervous system overload, sleep deprivation, panic, overwhelm, and mental health crises happen far more often than people realize, especially in capable, responsible, high-functioning people who have simply been carrying too much for too long. And one of the things I talk about in that book is this. Sometimes people are not going crazy. Sometimes their nervous system is just overwhelmed. And sleep plays a much bigger role in that conversation than many people realize. Let's start with the cycle. So many people know painfully well. You're exhausted. You've been tired all day. You finally get into bed and your body says, thank goodness. And your brain says, perfect, now let's panic. Now suddenly your mind remembers every unfinished task, awkward conversation, medical symptom, unpaid bill, future worry, and hypothetical disaster. You check the clock, you realize you're not asleep, and you now are anxious about sleeping, which makes you sleep even less. Welcome to one of the most frustrating cycles in mental health, the anxiety-insomnia cycle. Poor sleep can worsen anxiety, and anxiety can worsen sleep. And before long, people are stuck in a loop that feels impossible to get out of. One poor night of sleep can make you more emotionally reactive the next day, more overwhelmed, more irritable, less patient, less resilient. Things that normally would have rolled off your back suddenly feel enormous. And when that continues for days or weeks or months or a lifetime, people often start wondering, why am I so anxious? Why am I snapping at everyone? And why can't I handle life like I normally do? Sometimes sleep deprivation is playing a much larger role than you realize. Not necessarily the whole story, but often an important piece of the story, because sleep is not passive. Sleep is active restoration. Your brain and body start doing important work when you're sleeping, and when that process repeatedly gets disrupted, you feel it emotionally. Depression and oversleeping, it's not always insomnia. When people think about sleep and mental health, they often think insomnia, but depression can look different. Sometimes depression causes us trouble falling asleep. We wake repeatedly or at 3 a.m. and we can't get back to sleep. And sometimes people sleep a lot and still feel exhausted because sleep quantity and restorative sleep are not always the same thing. You can sometimes sleep 10 hours and still wake up feeling heavy, foggy, flat, unmotivated, disconnected. Because depression can affect sleep quality and sleep architecture, meaning how sleep should be. And poor sleep can worsen depressive symptoms, so sleep and mood become deeply interconnected. This is one reason providers ask about sleep during mental health evaluations. Not because sleep explains everything, but because sleep gives us valuable information. And I think this is important to say. Please do not minimize chronic sleep struggles. People often tell themselves, I'm functioning, I'm fine, I'll catch up eventually. But sleep deprivation affects concentration, emotional regulation, memory, pain tolerance, appetite, energy, stress response, and mental health. It's not a luxury, it's healthcare. So we need to talk about hormones, and we can't do that without talking about cortisol. Think of cortisol as part of your body's alert system, helpful when appropriate, protective when needed. Your body is designed to respond to danger. The challenge comes when your nervous system starts living in chronic activation, because many people listening are not just busy, they're carrying enormous emotional loads like burnout, trauma, grief, healthcare stress, parenting stress, financial pressure, hormonal changes, chronic responsibility, high achievement, chronic stimulation, and your nervous system responds to chronic pressure by staying activated. And this is what people tell me. I'm exhausted all day, suddenly awake at night. My body's tired, but my brain won't stop. I feel tired and wired. It's not uncommon. Your nervous system has learned to survive in activation. And some of the things that I want people to hear compassionately is that your body does not always move from survival mode into deep restorative sleep with the flip of a switch, especially if you've been functioning under prolonged stress, and especially if your nervous system no longer remembers what calm feels like. And honestly, this is another reason why I wrote Am I Going Crazy? Because so many people, well, they say, I can't sustain this pace anymore. Sleep falls apart and anxiety increases. The mind becomes louder and the person becomes frightened by their own symptoms. It's because the nervous system is overwhelmed, and protecting sleep becomes incredibly important, because sleep is not just rest, it's nervous system care. And we cannot talk about sleep and mental health without talking about trauma, because trauma changes sleep for a lot of people. Some people get their sleep interrupted. It's restless. And for others, they wake repeatedly. Others, the body startles awake at small noises. And for some times, nighttime, it's just nervous and loud. Because when the body has experienced trauma, chronic stress, loss, danger, burnout, or prolonged overwhelm, the nervous system remains vigilant, protective, scanning, and the survival mode does not just shut off. So, your nervous system learned survival. Your body adapted. The problem is sometimes survival systems remain activated long after the danger has passed, and that can deeply affect rest. It can cause nightmares, disrupted sleep. Sometimes the nighttime isn't peaceful. Sometimes it's where peace goes away and fear shows up. Trauma dreams, waking up sweating, with your heart racing and panicked, disoriented, afraid to go back to sleep, feeling exhausted before the day even begins. And sometimes people quietly assume that they have to live like this forever. And I want to challenge that. You don't have to simply suffer through restlessness, nightmares, without talking to someone. If nightmares are happening frequently, if they are disrupting your functioning, if you're afraid to sleep, if your nights feel unsafe, please talk with your healthcare provider or your therapist, because support does exist. For some people, trauma-focused therapy helps, and for others, EMDR, CBTI, trauma therapy, nervous system work, or psychotherapy may be helpful. For some people, medication becomes part of a conversation. And for some, it's a combination of both. You don't have to white-knuckle your way through nightmares forever. You deserve support. You deserve what feels safer than that. And honestly, this is another place where I think about, am I going crazy? Because one of the terrifying things about severe stress, nervous system overwhelm, panic, and trauma is sleep disruption. People become frightened by what their own brain is doing. The fear often becomes part of the suffering. Am I dreaming this? Why can't I calm myself down? What's happening to me? You're not alone in that experience. When severe sleep loss might be something more serious, I want you to understand that sometimes sleep It's poor because of stress, anxiety, burnout, hormones, trauma, grief, a racing nervous system, but sometimes severe sleep disruption can be part of a deeper issue medically or psychiatrically. If you have gone a day or more without sleep, with minimal sleep, very minimal sleep, and are not tired, I want you to pay attention to that, because that's different from I'm exhausted but I can't sleep. If you're having a significantly decreased need for sleep, feeling unusually energized despite not sleeping, racing thoughts or impulsivity, feeling unusually activated or agitated or overly confident, your mind moving unusually fast, please contact your clinician. If you're having hallucinations, paranoia, confusion, feeling disconnected from reality, severe agitation, please seek prompt medical or psychiatric evaluation, because severe sleep disruption could be bipolar disorder. And I don't want to scare you for that. I think that we need to recognize that sleep problems may need more than sleep hygiene alone. Goodness, I can't even speak tonight. Sometimes there's brain fog, irritability. Have you ever noticed that concentration can disappear whenever you aren't sleeping well, or you forget words, or why you walk into a room? Your patience evaporates, your emotional threshold sinks, you feel more anxious, more overwhelmed, more reactive. Small inconveniences suddenly feel enormous. And then there's cravings like sugar and carbs, caffeine, comfort food. Your body's trying to find energy, trying to compensate, trying to stay functional. Poor sleep affects attention and memory and emotional regulation, stress response, pain tolerance, appetite, all of these things. Sometimes people become incredibly self-critical about the symptoms that are being amplified by chronic sleep deprivation. You need sleep. And that's not something to be ashamed of, because sleep that's not optimal can make you feel crazy. Okay, so let's talk about this. There's no long step regimen to get you back to sleep, just realistic foundations. There are things that often help support the nervous system to create better conditions for rest. You need a nighttime routine. That's so important. One of the biggest things I want people to understand is your nervous system can benefit from a transition. So many of us spend the entire day overstimulated, working, caretaking for others, problem solving, scrolling, multitasking and managing emotions, responding to messages, carrying stress, absorbing information, living in go mode. And then we expect the brain to instantly become peaceful because we changed into pajamas. It doesn't work that way. We have to have signals that the day is ending, that we're going towards rest. And your nighttime routine does not have to be complicated. Maybe it looks like dimming the lights, lowering stimulation and putting your phone down earlier, stretching or reading, prayer and meditation, journaling, racing thoughts out of your head and onto the paper, calming music, a warm shower, taking medications consistently as prescribed, protecting a reasonably consistent sleep and wake schedule. The goal is not perfection. The goal is helping your nervous system recognize, hey, we're safe enough to power down now. And for people with anxiety, trauma histories, burnout, ADHD, grief, chronic stress, caregiving responsibilities, or overload, you have to transition. Sometimes it's not just stress. Maybe it's sleep apnea. If you're snoring or feeling unrested the next day, I want to mention that from a medical perspective, it could be obstructive sleep apnea. Not every sleep problem is anxiety. It's not always a sleep habit. Sometimes you're stopping breathing. And if that's happening to you, you need to talk to your doctor to get a sleep study, because a CPAP can really help your sleep. You want to get more oxygen to your brain. Untreated sleep apnea can affect far more than daytime energy. It can affect concentration and memory, brain fog, irritability, mood, anxiety symptoms, depression symptoms, blood pressure, cardiovascular health, and overall well-being. Sometimes people spend years blaming themselves for feeling exhausted when it might just be sleep apnea. So there's a lot to unpack here, and I know I went fast. And honestly, I went so fast because I am so tired and cannot wait to get to bed because I'm recording this the night before I put it out. Okay, lots of things here. Sleep is so important. Sleep is the number one piece to your mental health. It affects your mood, your anxiety, your cognition, the way you show up and perform in relationships and work and for yourself. You don't have to get to bed at 9 p.m. every night, but you do need to reduce stimulation. You do need a good nighttime routine. You do need to make sure you're taking care of your health, because if you get good sleep, a lot of things are going to feel a lot better the next day. I promise that. One more thing. Alcohol before bed, not a good idea. It may knock you out, but it's going to wake you up, and then you're just going to be more anxious the next day. Okay, I think this is a good place to stop because I am really tired. It's been a long day. If you want to connect with me, you can connect on social media, on Facebook at Life by Design Press, on Instagram at Angela Weiss Author, or I'll put my author website in the show notes. Listening to this podcast does not create a provider relationship with me. If you feel like you are in a crisis, please call 911 or 988, the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. Thank you so much for being here, and I really hope that you get a good night's sleep tonight.